everyone, and welcome back to Deeper Roots. As an artist, one of the things that you want to do the most is put your heart into your work. Otherwise, it'll be super obvious that you don't really like what you're doing. You know that people like Shakespeare and Michael Angelo had a passion for their crafts because the work was so hard to do, and they pioneered their respective arts. You can say the same thing about every other artistic medium, be it photography, digital art, cinema, and video art. Whatever it is, people put their greatest desires into their art. So, does that mean that everything a Christian artist or even business person does have to be directly related to God? Can Christian artists still make secular art? Because if God is supposed to be number one in their lives, shouldn't Christians exclusively make Christian art or run Christian businesses? This is the core of our listeners' question, and it is a great topic to talk about this week on Deeper Roots. Did you know that a listener submitted this question? That means that you are able to as well. You can go ahead and submit your own anonymous question at www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. There, you not only find the forum to submit your questions, but also the places where you can find our podcast and the rest of our episodes. The forum is completely anonymous, and you'll be able to hear your question answered right here on the podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's get to the conversation. Welcome back to Deeper Roots. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We have myself, Pastor Luis, and Esther here today. Today, one of our listeners asked the question, can Christian artists still make secular art? They wanted to clarify, and they said, most commonly found within music, should Christian artists still make art that isn't quote-unquote Christian? Or should Christian business people have to make their businesses Christian too? Is it a sin if the art or the business is still primarily secular in nature? Pastor?
All right. Thank you, Derek. And thank you, listener, for that question. I think just off the top of my head or right off the bat, I like that the question used the word secular because I think that's where we need to start sort of doing some defining of terms when it comes to what is secular, what is Christian, and maybe the word we most grew up listening to was the word worldly, right?
Yeah.
So just let's start there. Brother Derek, what do you think is the difference between worldly, secular, and Christian?
So I think that Christian talks about bringing everything, trying to tie everything back into the Christian faith, and everything is caused by something in the faith. That would be like if you had a nonprofit that would give food to the hungry, you would the justification for that would be because the Bible tells us to give in charity, right? A secular business is something that doesn't have anything to do with any religion. So you can have a nonprofit that gives to the needy, and your justification for that is because it's the right thing to do. And maybe worldly would be something that isn't associated with religion, but also it's a little bit more difficult to say, but like it's motivated by human things. It's motivated by more selfish ideas rather than selfless ideas. Like if I had a nonprofit to feed the needy, it would be because it makes me feel better.
Okay. Esther, what do you think?
I like those reasons. I mean, very similar to what Derek said. So I don't think I have much to say regarding that.
All right. So I think that's where we need to start sort of defining those three things. Like I said, the one I grew up listening to most of us probably do, is the term worldly. Mm-hmm. And we have to recognize that's more of a Christendom word. Because it's how we define something that is of this world in the sense of it being sinful. So we have to, first of all, define that. When we're talking about worldly, we're talking about something that is sinful. in nature, or that goes against our values as Christians, right? That goes against the values of the kingdom of Christ, and instead pushes the norms and the ideology and the and what the devil wants to push through this world. So that's why we call it the worldly. Secular is going to be things that are not necessarily Christian, but not necessarily also goes against the scriptures, or is not being sinful. So there's the secular part, which we have to define a little bit further later on when it applies to the question. But then we have Christian, like you said, anything that has to do with the realm of Christianity and doing things for God and want to make sure. So there's Christian, like Christian music, there's Christian service, there's Christian art, and there's Christian drama and everything like that. But then there's also secular stuff as well, right? So the question is it sinful or is it wrong, right? Is that what the question was? Is it wrong for you to have a purely secular business, or being an artist in that case, like for example musicians, and not have it also have some elements of Christianity if you're a Christian, right? That's sort of what I'm understanding. Is that right?
I think that I think you're right. And also within their clarification, I just think that, like, when they say most commonly found in music, I just think that's probably like a perspective thing. Like, this person probably is most exposed to Christian music, but a whole bunch of Christian artists make a whole bunch of different kinds of art. Like painters don't necessarily have to depict the caricature of Jesus, right? All the time in their art, because that's not what they have. That's not their prerogative. I guess it's so secular, but there are Christians. So I guess this question is more asking about if they are still able to make not Christian art, or a business person can make a business that's not necessarily dedicated to Christianity, Jesus, or the Bible.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about that, the clearest example for me is like artists, like Christian music artists, both in the Spanish world and the English world. You have people that have come. Well, let me just look at different cases. There's some that started off as a Christian artist, or a singer singing in church or whatever, and then sort of just became a secular singer and totally abandoned the Christian realm. As far as that, and some even left Christianity, which is very sad. Then there's some who continue using their talents and things for the things of the Lord, and still produce, maybe, let's say, art or whatever, or music for the secular world. And then there's also people who were not saved. They were, like, for example, I can think of a couple examples in the Spanish world who were actually singers already. They had their whole stardom and everything, and then they came to the Lord, and some have stopped singing or switched over to just singing for the Lord, and some have continued singing, but there's been a change in the way they produce their music and their art. So the verses that come to mind is this. I think 1 Corinthians 10:31 applies. Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. So how do we apply that? And we'll see that in a moment. Another verse that comes to mind as well, for me, is Romans 14:8. If we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord. Alive or dead, we still belong to the Lord. In other words, that our lives, right, are supposed to mean revolve around bringing God glory, bringing people to the knowledge of Christ. And then the other one that comes to mind is Galatians 2:20. It says, "I am crucified with Christ, but I live, yet not I anymore, but Christ liveth in me. And in that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith in the Son of God." So even Paul sort of saying, what I live in the flesh, that's a good way of saying the secular world, that we still live in this world. We still have a connection to this world. And how do we then apply those things to someone in that situation, whether you're an artist, whether you're a painter, whether you're a baker, whether you provide services or whatever. So before I can preach, I'm a preacher. So Esther, what do you think as far as those verses and what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I was thinking about examples while you were talking, and the first one that actually popped up for me was Charlie Brown, Snoopy, which was just a great example of someone who is a believer, but they also use his work secularly. But it's rooted, for what he made it for, to bring honor and glory to the Lord. So I think no matter what you do, and if we are faithful to the Lord and give him honor and glory, it is possible that our work is seen beyond our little bubble of quote unquote Christianity.
And that actually reminds me of another example. You mentioned like Snoopy and the Charlie Brown series. The person who made that is Christian. So that reminds me actually of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Correct.
He was a devout Catholic, and he wrote the entirety of the Lord of the Rings, and he actually said that like this is supposed to be an analogy, or I'm not sure if an analogy is the right word for it, but it was a somewhat of a dedication to him and his faith, and that also reminds me of another thing, that apparently he's the guy who talked to C.S. Lewis about being about the faith, and C.S. Lewis actually became a Protestant. I think J.R.R. Tolkien was a bit upset about that, but C.S. Lewis became Protestant and then wrote Narnia, which is a much closer analogy to the biblical story. So I guess there's just a different, two very different ways to address the idea of of having Christianity in your work.
I hate to use this example, but I think I'll use it just because it's so prevalent today. Someone who's really passionate about a cause, it's not going to be limited to just the times that they spend on that cause. You will see it permeated through every facet of their lives. For example, someone who champions gay rights or whatever, they're very strong as far as pushing that, and it's not going to be a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 kind of thing for them. It's going to be on their bumper stickers. It's going to be manifested in their artwork. It's going to be manifested in their clothing. It's going to be manifested in everywhere, because they have a cause they want to push. And we're clear, we obviously take the biblical position on that subject, but I'm just saying that as far as an example, that's really what we're talking about when it comes to being a Christian. You're first a Christian and then an artist. You're first a Christian and then a baker. You're first a Christian and then anything else that you might be. And whatever you do, you want to be able to glorify Christ through it and use that as a platform in certain ways. Now, this is where we might differentiate with some other believers. And I'll just share my position on this. I believe when you see these verses, all things to the glory of God, whether you live or die, you are of the Lord, you belong to him now, but live not I, but now Christ lives in me. And what I live now in the flesh, I live it for Christ who died and loved me. All those verses basically say, in whatever you do, find a way to make Christ be known. And for some artists, that means that now, because they're Christian, maybe they came to Christ, they'll still sing maybe secular music, but now it's not going to contain bad words. It's not going to have themes that are anti-biblical. It's not going to be about sexually explicit. And things are going to change for that person. They might still have very generic love song or whatever. And I think that's fine as long as you're still using that platform some way or some form to make Christ be known. And that means sometimes at the award show saying, I want to give this to the Lord Jesus Christ, and making sure that that your life is known, not so much for your talent, but for the person who gave you that talent, whether you're a painter or whatever. So you have to find a way, especially when you reach areas where you have recognition and you have fame. You have a platform, and you want to use that for the honor and glory of God. The other position some people might take is, if you're a Christian and you're a painter, now you should just paint Christian paintings or just produce Christian songs, which is great. I think you should use your talents for the thing to further the gospel, whatever you do. But that doesn't mean you can't use it also for secular. And we do have secular things we use. We sing secular songs. Happy birthday to you. It's a secular song and stuff like that. But it just means that it really does your heart permeate. Is your heart permeated by Christ? Is he evident in everything you want to do? And people know that you're a Christian. You're a Christian artist. You're a Christian singer, in the sense that first you're a Christian and then you're whatever else you might be. And I think that's what it is. The other side of the spectrum would be someone that says, well, I'm a Christian, but that's just my Sunday thing, or that's just my personal thing, and then tries to blend into the world. And now that's where we're getting into now becoming worldly, because being a Christian is about being a light in the world. It's not about hiding your light. It's about trying to be someone that does stand out for Christ and not blends into the world. And sometimes a person might want to separate those two things and say, well, this is my private faith and this is my secular phase, and never try to blend the two. And I think that's just an excuse for living worldly, fleshly ways, instead of having the cause that Paul lived for, where he says, whatever I do.
That God blesses you. Like, God blesses you when you are loyal to him. Not to say that everyone's going to be famous.
No.
But you know what I mean? Like, he blesses you because you are loyal to him. You know, I feel someone like the creator of Charlie Brown and all these others, God uses it and blesses it when they're faithful, so that others, with the purpose of others to know him, but also there is that blessing that you get recognized for your work.
Exactly. And also in the business world, you have the example of Colgate, you have the example of In-N-Out, you have the example of Chick-fil-A. People who are in it, obviously, for a business. It's a business, but they haven't separated that from their Christian faith. And they've stood for what they believe. And even I have a affinity for Chick-fil-A, not just because of their chicken sandwiches, but because they close on Sundays. I think that's awesome, because it just shows that they have a conviction of honoring God's day, and they never lack. I mean, I was looking at the statistics. I mean, they have 1/3, I believe, the amount of franchises as McDonald's. So they're much smaller than McDonald's, yet they're the second most in revenue in the United States after McDonald's. McDonald's rules it, but then after comes Chick-fil-A. So with 2/3 less franchises in the United States. So it's really crazy how you see God's blessing when you choose to honor Christ with whatever you do in life.
So talking about Chick-fil-A, I think that we've established that I think that we've established that there is somewhat of a spectrum on how you can approach bringing Christ or bringing Christianity, bringing God and his glory into your work or into your business. But do we all have to do it in the same way as Chick-fil-A? Like, even if the business, that means, like, even if the business or art doesn't have anything to do or relate to Christianity. That's a broad question.
I think that's a good example. Chick-fil-A has nothing to do with Christianity. A chicken sandwich is not more Christian than a hamburger. But they're using their platform for Christ.
Yeah.
They're a big company, and they use it to support groups that they believe are furthering more values for the gospel and for Christ. And the question that would be fair then is, do other businesses do the same for the things they believe in? And the answer is obviously yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's way where it's completely what's it called, eclipsed when we compare how many businesses support conservative Christian values movements, while the other ones, the big ones that support all the more liberal ones. So like I said, it's only fair to have them use that same power the way other businesses use it as well.
And then on top of that, I think it's also important to recognize, so a lot of people find it like Chick-fil-A's and I think well, Hobby Lobby is a whole different issue, but the Chick-fil-A investments that they put into like traditional family kind of organizations, but we also see a whole bunch of other companies putting in money into like lobbying in the government for things that are not so great either. I mean, not necessarily anti-biblical, but they are definitely like very like anti-consumer that they lobby into. Like, for example, Toyota lobbying in the U.S. government to prevent electric cars from going into higher production, or Intuit, the people who do tax season, who do TurboTax, lobbying the U.S. government to prevent
Automation.
Is that how it is?
Automation, yeah.
The automation of the whole process, because every other country in the world has a whole tax season down. Like, it's not even a season. You just get you just either don't get anything or get charged anything because they tax you properly, or if they have tax returns, it's done automatically. But here in the U.S., we can't do that because we got companies lobbying against that. So, like, while those aren't necessarily like anti-biblical principles, they're definitely like against people, against like anti-consumer.
It's against.
So it just
it's against it's pro values that they believe.
Yeah, exactly. So
and
like
that's the point. Yeah.
Every company is going to put money into what they believe is valuable, and some people disagree with what Chick-fil-A deems as valuable. I think that there can be there could be different things that they put their money into, but it is that's their prerogative, and as a company, they have the right to do that.
Yeah, they do, and I think it's a good example of what we're talking about. And whatever you do it to the glory of Christ.
Yeah.
You do it to magnify Christ. It would be very easy to just succumb to the pressure today and not take any position and sort of go down the neutral road and say, I'm just going to sell chicken sandwiches and just stick to that, and not use my platform when everybody else does do it. Everybody else does use it to further their values and their principles. So a Christian should do that as well. And we have to understand that when you do that, you will get pushback.
Yeah.
Christ said that clearly. When you live for Christ, you're going to have the world hate you. If you're popular with the world, and that's one thing I would say to any Christian artist that might listen to this, it's just you want to use your platform to a point that where you can influence the world, but not to where you are. What's the word I want to? Well, you are idolized by the world. When the world starts idolizing you, usually it's because you've already crossed that line between just using your platform for Christ and now being worldly and now wanting to please this world. Because when you live for Christ, when you try to use your platform for Christ, you're always going to have pushback. You're always going to have people that are going to want to push back against you and everything.
And I have one more question. I think we have already addressed this one in our Christian music 2 episodes, the part 1, part 2 episodes. We had a guest on that one, and it would be great if you want to go listen to that one. But this question is, should a Christian artist or business person's personal life affect the way you receive or understand their work?
Restate that again?
Should a Christian artist or business person's personal life affect the way that you receive or understand their work?
Yes. Going back to the question, what we were saying, yes, because if your life is all about Christ, if your life is all about Him, then somehow it's going to also come through the way it's being communicated, your art. Again, going back to the example, you wouldn't expect any less from a person who's truly into the whole gay activism. You would expect that everything they do, whether it's music, whether it's they hold a bakery, whether it's the way you receive it is going to be something that shows their values, shows what they stand for. And I think that's why I always use their example, because the world knows how to do what many Christians lack today when it comes to standing up for a cause and believing what they really want to believe. And I think we've sort of like taken the closet while they came out of the closet, and we're sort of shy about wanting to live our lives as Christians and have Christ be magnified through whatever we do. And like I said, again, we take that middle road again. That we believe. I don't think a Christian artist, I mean, a person who sings or a person who produces art doesn't mean you can't produce just secular art, as long as it doesn't contradict your values as a Christian. But you should look for ways to further things. One of the famous painters is Thomas Kincaid, and he was a Christian. And he's very famous, and it wasn't like he was putting the cross on everything, although there are a lot of paintings that are beautiful and stuff like that and have Christian themes, but it's just through it he always never shied away from what he believed in as well.
Okay. Esther, do you have any more comments?
Yeah, I think just the opposite of what just Pastor said as well. Like, if your personal life is a mess, you can't be singing for, you know what I mean? Like, if you are an artist who life is chaotic and you're singing for the Lord, it doesn't work that way either, right? Like, I won't listen to someone whose personal life, their testimony is not good. I, as a Christian, will separate myself from that. So just from the opposite of what Pastor
So if
was
someone,
talking about.
so essentially,
So your personal
yeah.
life does impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Overall, I also pretty much agree. I think that there is a point where someone's personal life can become a stumbling block for either myself or somebody else. Like if a Christian singer cheats on their husband or wife, then like I don't know if I can support that person and give that person my money. What kind of Christianity are they leading? What kind of Christianity are they singing about? And are they even agreeing with what they're talking about, what they're singing about? So there's the stumbling block potential there.
And I'm not going to say this is completely always the case, but 99% of the time, if that's the case, that they cheated on their wife, they weren't probably living their art for Christ to begin with.
And it probably was for other reasons. Like, it probably would be worldly reasons, like selfish reasons, just for the money, because we know there's a lot of money in Christian art.
Yeah, and it's sad because you can also look at examples of people who started off in churches and stuff, and then they left in to sing to the world and everything, and they became worldly, not secular, worldly, and they ended up in sad circumstances. And I believe, again, this is my personal belief, please don't email me about this, but I believe there's some good examples, like Elvis probably was a Christian, and that's why the Lord took him early. And Whitney Houston, I believe she was a Christian based on her testimonies and her early life and everything where she grew up. I think she was an example of someone who unfortunately forgot that her beautiful voice and platform that God allowed her to have was meant for him, not for her. And she got involved in the wrong crowd, the wrong people, drugs and everything, and unfortunately she passed away early.
Okay. So do you have any more closing comments? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and close the podcast for today. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Again, if you want to submit your own questions, we would love to hear your questions. You can submit them online when you go to www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. There you'll find the form, and you'll also find our other episodes and also where we're streaming, in case you want to try us out on YouTube or on Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. We're in all of those places. Again, thank you for joining us today, and hopefully you'll come again next week. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Deeper Roots. If you want to submit a question, follow up on something we talked about on the podcast, or you want to find us online, you can go to our webpage, which is ibbvn.org/deeperroots. Deeper Roots is a ministry of Iglesia Bíblica Baptista Vida Nueva, which is a local church in Castro Valley, California. And you can learn more about us and our church by going to our website, ibbvn.org.